Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're talking about re-raising errors and the on-success block. As you can see, I've written some code here. That's just because I didn't want to bore you going through writing all of this code, especially because it's only example code. This code is also available in the code lecture on GitHub, and that lecture is at the start of this section. So if you've not yet downloaded or had a look at the code for this section, you can go to the first lecture of the section and go to the GitHub link that's there, and you can see this code. The resource that's attached to this lecture contains an explanation for some reasonably related sample code as well, but it's not exactly the same thing. Just because the resource attached to this lecture has some explanations and it uses some pseudocode to explain some concepts, the code that I'm seeing here on my screen, the code that you're seeing on your screen, is on the GitHub. So feel free to download it and have a look if you want. So what we've got is a user class. Nothing new here. It's got an init method that takes in a name and a property engagement, a variable engagement, and then sets the name to be name and the engagement metrics to be the engagement property there. Then it's also got a dunder repr function that returns the user's name in a nicely formatted string. This user class is going to be used by this getUserScore function that takes in a user parameter. This is going to try to return whatever the perform calculation function gives us with the engagement metrics of the user passed in, and if it fails, it's going to print out incorrect values provided with a key error. Perform calculation takes in the user's engagement metrics as a parameter there, as an argument, and then returns the clicks property of that metrics multiplied by 5 and the hits multiplied by 2. So imagine this is a user that's visiting a website and we want to calculate, their score to see how engaged they are with our brand. If the clicks multiplied by 5 and the metrics, the hits multiplied by 2 gives us a particular value, we're going to say, this person is very engaged. We've also got down here another function called send engagement notification. And this would send them an email saying, thank you for being so engaged with our brand. Here's a coupon code for you to download or something. Of course, this doesn't actually send any emails right now, but we could do that and we'll look at sending emails later on in the course. Then at the very bottom, we're creating a user. Rolf is the name, and these are the engagement metrics. He's done 61 clicks and 100 hits. And then we're going to call the getUserScore function here for my user. So this is the sample code we've got. Not too much code, I hope. Fairly understandable, I hope. It can sometimes be handy to do something with an exception, handle it, like we do here. But then it can also be useful to not silence it, i.e. keep letting it bubble up and eventually crash your program, so you know that you've done something wrong at some point. For example, the exception here, key error, is caught, and if we were to mess up and create our users with a click key instead of clicks, this is going to fail with a key error because clicks won't be a key of our metrics dictionary that is down here. So let's run UserScore. Remember, right-click it and run it. And you'll see that we get incorrect values provided to our calculation function. And we get that because, of course, the key error was raised, and we then printed this out and nothing else happened. If we are not paying attention, we may miss that. Let's face it. If this is the only line of output in our program right now, but if this was a long program, there may be many lines of output, and you may miss that one amongst all the other ones. So the best thing to do, at least while you're developing, is to allow the errors to continue bubbling up and crash your program. When you're going to give your program to your users, make sure that your program doesn't crash too easily. And that may mean catching the error somewhere or not allowing it to continue bubbling up. The way we allow it to bubble up is we just type raise. And that has to be inside the accept block. So inside the accept block, we can raise, and what that does is that re-raises the error that got us into this block in the first place. So if we press play again, you'll see that now we get our trace back after we get our print. The traceback now says key error clicks. And that was used here in metrics clicks, multiplied by 5, and so forth. This was inside the perform calculation function, as you can see here. And this was called up here, as you can see in this line. This was inside the get user score function, as you can see here. And that was called here, which is down here, line 27. And that is in your module, which is your file that you're running. So that's the file that you're running. Okay, this is, again, the stack trace. You need to get good at understanding and following the stack trace. That's a really important skill. So the raise keyword here must go inside the except block. Otherwise, you cannot use raise on its own. You have to give it the error you want to raise. But that's only if you use it outside the except block. If you use it inside the except block, you can just type raise and it will re-raise the error that got you here in the first place. Okay, now let's say that we want to send an engagement notification to this user if we've got some limit of clicks or something. Let's say that if the user's score is over 500, we want to send them a notification. We only want to send the notification, and by the way, I'm going to remove this raise thing here for now. We only want to send the notification if we didn't raise an error, of course. We only want to send the notification if the perform calculation succeeded and we got a correct score. So how may we do that? Well, we've seen the finally block. We could say send engagement notification to user. But the finally block runs no matter what. The try is going to run. The except may or may not run. The finally will run. So finally is always going to run after the try except block no matter what. Unless, of course, you re-raise the exception and your program crashes. If you do that, the finally won't run either. But let's imagine we don't want to re-raise the exception, but we want the engagement notification to send if our user does have the correct score. Well, we can use an else, actually. And that's a pretty bizarre thing to use here, because what it means is that we're going to try to run this thing here, and if there is no error, we are then going to go to the else. So this else is only going to run if an error does not happen, unlike the finally, which runs every time. Of course, it's telling us this code is unreachable, because if this code succeeds, we are returning, which means we're exiting the function, so this is never going to run. Either we will have this error, in which case this won't run, or we will have this return, in which case this won't run. So we just have to remove the return there. And if we did want to perform a calculation here and just return that value, and then we should do that, and then we should not use this construct. Instead, this should go down here. Right? So this function maybe should be renamed to something else other than get user score if we wanted to do this. Okay, maybe it should be email engaged users or user, something like that. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this construct because it's not a popular thing. Not a lot of Python developers know about it. And indeed, if you go on the internet and look at tutorials for try except in Python, I guarantee that almost none of them will mention this else. And it's not that used, but it's interesting to know about it just in case you want to run something only if an error doesn't occur, like send an email notification. We will be using this later on in the course. So that's it for this video. We've looked at the onSuccess block, that's this one here, because this happens when we succeed in our try except. And we've also looked at re-raising exceptions, which is very simple. Just put a raise inside the except block, and if an exception does happen, we will raise it again. So, by the way, I've changed the click back to clicks. So now we should be able to run this. And of course, I've also renamed the function, so let's make sure we're calling the right function. We should be able to run it. And, oh, this one here. Sorry, I didn't change it. now we see that the notification was sent to user Rolf. Because we performed the calculation, and then we send the engagement notification. And if we wanted, of course, to check that the user's score is correct, we could do something like user.score is that, and then if user.score is greater than 500, send the notification. Now, we've said user.score here is equal to something, but user.score was not defined in the init method. This is a bad practice. You should generally define all the properties in the init method, just so you know what exists. So you can define the score as 0 in here, and then this is not creating a new property. Although you can, it's not advised. And now this is just updating it, which is better. Now we can see that a notification was sent to the user Rolf because their score is greater than 500. Indeed, 61 times 5 plus 100 times 2 is 502, I think. I'm pretty sure. Let's not say that it is any number. It is greater than 500. That's what I know. So that's why we're sending the notification there. Anyway, that's it for this video. I won't keep you any longer. This was the try except else and how to re-raise exceptions as well. I'll see you on the next one.